All current technology announced is actually old tech. When something gets discovered, it's often experimented on, exhausted, and drained by governments and militaries long before it reaches the public. This isn't some conspiracy, it's fact. I know this because I'm one of the people tasked with development on things that are beyond what's currently public. My team and I were sent to a small country in Africa. It was a small state that was not on any public map. This made things easy to deny, and made hiding the less ethical projects much easier. It was decided long ago to never give the country a true identity. Its name changes every few years, so if 2 generations of workers decided to become whistleblowers, it'd sound like they were talking about 2 completely different things. Much harder for the tinfoil hats to piece things together. Some of the team jokingly nicknamed the place Wakanda, a current reference, and again, would be harder for conspiracists to take seriously. One of the top priorities we had was never letting the outside world get a whiff that we had an entire population secretly used for experimentation. Their whole existence was a lie, completely separated from the real world, observed carefully by the many outside forces that worked there under a shared agreement. The plus side was that they lived a life of luxury. They were the first to get all the beneficial technology we worked on. Tech that you're probably looking forward to seeing a decade from now, just handily available in their shops. I'm pretty sure they haven't had to touch a steering wheel in years, their streets looking like a less exaggerated interpretation of a sci-fi movie set in the future. Though this balance was sometimes superseded by the less than beneficial ideas in the works. It's pretty much universal opinion to be opposed to the idea of human experimentation. But realistically, there are many examples where testing on a small sample group of people could have prevented disaster. A perfect example of this was the rushed use of Agent Orange, a nerve agent used as a weapon. However, the long-term effects were not tested, and the repercussions of its use is still prevalent in the areas it was used. There are some examples that you'll never know about too. Did you know we found what was essentially a cure for cancer? It worked great for the first decade. However, after that, something came back. It wasn't cancer. It was worse. And it was contagious. Can you imagine if that was rushed to shelves upon discovery? We calculated 1/5 of the population would have remained, namely nomad tribes far away from civilization. The experiment I helped lead had an ambitious goal. The idea conceived was to genetically enhance individuals for the benefit of society. The perfect genetics we found for imbuing the volunteer was that of an ant. With an ant's bolstered strength, enhanced constitution, and abnormal stamina, they would be the perfect workers. Manual labor injury and fatality rates would drop to nearly 0, plus the added healing factor would make the few injuries negligible. It wouldn't just be for work either. Their quality of life would improve drastically as well. Extended life, the energy to enjoy life, a massive reduction in genetic diseases like dementia and such. You'd just be yourself, but better. No matter what, the procedure would always physically change their appearance somewhat. The hybrids would develop small points behind the skin on their forehead, their bodies trying to replicate antennas. Their back and upper torso would swell, their frame accommodating their extra functions and strength. They also grew smaller bumps around their ribs, their bodies attempting to grow additional limbs. The biggest indicator of a hybrid is their skin, which would tint slightly with a dark purple hue. There were a number of positive benefits that we never fully calculated for. The hybrids no longer needed to breathe entirely with their mouth. The subjects started taking on the property of partially breathing through their skin, something which greatly helped the deep cave miners, the precious rocks they dug up being crucial to funding the offsets of our research. Our rocketing profits was an indicator of the continued success of the program. Minus the unwanted extras, for the most part, it was a success. However, it didn't take long to find a few bugs in the program. Something we didn't initially account for was the aggression. This, plus their amplified strength, caused a few caved-in skulls at a bar and a warpath that was only stopped by some heavy firepower. This wasn't an isolated incident. Despite the many setbacks, we were proud that, underneath it all, our subjects retained their humanity and memories. Our goal was to upgrade the human race, and it looked like it was becoming realized as a success in our eyes. With each praise of success that spread across the city, the more volunteers we received. We had it to the point where we were performing the procedure on a large test group every day, confident in the safety of it all. These volunteers naturally joined our workforce and turned into a small union of hard workers. They didn't mind the labor, as in their enhanced state, what was once a grueling grind was now a brisk task. Imagine getting the wage of a dangerous job like working on an oil rig, when it just felt like you were flipping burgers at McDonald's. The hybrids were laughing down their sleeves to the bank. A small team of hybrids could outperform a legion of an army of ordinary human workers. I was proud. During my stay, I made friends with a local. I snuck him some contraband communication equipment that could only receive and send calls to a device only I owned. Basically, a glorified walkie-talkie. If I were to give a civilian in that country any sort of outside communication, they'd have my head. And that's not a figure of speech. I knew I wouldn't be kept in that city forever, and would be called back home to work more inland. If I was called away, everything here would then fall into confidential territory, and I'd never know how things fared when I'm gone. So I set this up as a way to secretly keep up with my baby project, which I cared so deeply about. Sadly, that time came sooner than I'd thought. One of the hybrid workers was hanging out in a small town on the outskirts of the closed-off country, which sometimes hosted some of the surrounding tribes that didn't adhere to any of the societies. They thought they were free. However, they were really just another harbour demographic for experimentation. Like before, a bar brawl broke out. It was normal for them to fight out their differences, a local belief that if you won a fight, their god favoured your opinion more. But as you can imagine, this was different. Our worker got into an altercation with one of the tribe's daughters. In private, he ended up ripping off her jaw and beat her to death with it. It wasn't hard to figure out the connotation of what happened and the obvious ramifications of his actions. The tribe declared war on our city. We knew it was political, and more a gesture that would warrant diplomacy. But the higher-ups prioritized us over them, and ordered an immediate evacuation of most scientists and important figures. They told us our work here was done anyway. The only positive takeaway was that the experiment was marked as a massive success. A few months at home went by with no word, and suddenly, I was barraged with contact. They personally told me they wanted me to head the task of making the product commercially viable. Despite the long time of silence, they were now practically trying to rush it out of the door. Their goal was that they wanted it to be open for anyone who volunteered. It seemed like an easy thing to sell too. Want to never be tired? Want to always be in shape without having to slave away at a gym? Want to be the safest you can possibly be in your own skin? The marketing team was having a field day at how easy this was going to be to sell. I was obviously excited. My hard work, years of study, years of working within this organization from the bottom up, years of working hard to get them to trust me, years of my life dedicated to wanting to help humanity was finally going to pay off. People dreamed that humans' next steps were in the stars, but I was going to show everyone it was within us the whole time. Work was hard. I helped tweak the formula for mass production. I even secretly cranked down the potency somewhat to hopefully alleviate any type of enhanced aggression. We were already on the testing process when I started feeling nostalgic about my first run in Africa. Upon contact, rather than the warm welcome I expected, I was instead met with a frantic rambling. He sounded like he was still moving and was trying his best to be as quiet as possible, but he managed to get enough out to explain what happened. It turns out, after we left, they carried on testing effects I never accounted for. The hive mind. Behind my back, another smaller team was siphoning information from my research to recreate the same process, but with a queen ant. When the tribes declared a war, it gave them the excuse to try out a crueler intention of my work. What's worse was that it was a resounding success. All at once, anyone with a modification stood to attention and moved as one to converge. Imagine the perfect soldiers, all as one, all enhanced beyond human limitations, all following the omniscient command of a single leader. The tyrannical implications was disgusting. It didn't end there. After they wiped out the tribe at a disturbingly sinister pace, they then were set upon the city. Slowly, the team of workers, now scarily efficient killers, quickly made their way through the streets. They were upon the walls, climbing through the windows of the unbeknownst civilians. Only few got away, but they have nowhere to go. The whole country surrounded with many kill conditions to always keep them out of contact with the outside world. What remained was a city of ants. It wasn't hard to piece together what happened, why ants were chosen, why they somehow developed extra features I never accounted for, like antennae and thicker, near bulletproof skin. The objective the whole time was to make the most effective soldiers. Or worse, the perfect subservient population. I still showed up to work, now secretly armed with this knowledge. I kept my head down, when suddenly there was an announcement that there was no tested negative side effects, and the product was almost ready to be sent out. This announcement was done by the person who managed the whole team, the one who built up the dream team to go to the city. However, now, he appeared different. His skin was far darker. He could have tried to make the excuse it was the African sun, but that would never explain the dark purple hue it carried. He was more hunched, a feature which was overshadowed by his severely inflated upper torso. I'd seen the procedure done hundreds of times. However, I never saw inflammation that big. The only thing I could liken it to was like comparing the larger thorax of a queen ant to a regular worker ant. I knew that despite secretly tweaking the formula to lower aggression, it would mean nothing if they were simply controlled. From here on out, I can only do my part by hindering the development process. I've secretly sabotaged parts of the process, setting things back weeks or sometimes months at a time. But more and more researchers are brought in, each learning everything from the files, and each slowly getting good enough to replace me. Or worse, realize what I've been doing. Past then, it's only a matter of time before the product is announced. If it is, do not volunteer. Fight it.